So hello, I had just finished doing my video on what you can expect to not be able to do once you join the Jehovah's Witness religion, and I realized my list wasn't quite done, so I'm going to tag off a couple of more things really quick. From, be prepared to let your children die, exposing them to pedophilia, a whole slew of things, which is in part 1, which I will link below. Other things you can intend to give up if you decide to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Music, most music. This can also depend congregation to congregation, but for the most part, any kind of music that's good, you can plan on not listening to. I understand that in a lot of households, people are already strict on the kind of music that maybe they allow their kids to listen to, or maybe that they, prefer to listen to themselves. But I'm saying it's a pretty tight rope. There was some time that even like some country music was considered. Oh, Elvis was out. Sorry, random thoughts. So be prepared. I know when we were kids, my brother got in huge trouble. He was a little bit older than me, and he had a stash of music. And the younger brother was playing in his room. He was a toddler, found the music, and the shit hit the fan. It was not good. And I know when I moved back home, the one thing I tried to smuggle in was music. My parents let us listen to their music, so there's a lot of Bee Gees, which again, I feel like that was really, it was just really a double standard, because, I don't know what they thought was going to happen with our music. I remember going to a girlfriend's house when I was maybe 8 or 9, and she was listening to Parents Just Don't Understand by Will Smith, and that was probably the first time my mom was there, and my mom was like, "Oh my God, what is your daughter listening to?" referring to my friend. And my friend, her mom was like, "Oh, it's Will Smith, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and DJ Jazzy Jeff, and really funny songs." And so they proceed to play. I couldn't believe my mom even sat there and listened to the whole thing. And no, she shook her head at the end, and she's like, "I'm sorry, that is rap music." Yeah, she probably should have let that one go, because I ended up being a big fan of like NWA, and she probably should have just like thrown me the Will Smith bone. So yeah, definitely a lot of music's inappropriate, just because I like to listen to a lot of music that people find very offensive, but I didn't necessarily, expose my kids to that. They got the edited versions. But yeah, be prepared to give up a lot of stuff depending on your congregation if they deem that it's not appropriate. Same goes for entertainment. So for instance, we weren't allowed to watch the Flintstones as kids. Now I will say my mom is a little bit more extreme, but I think she represents still a good portion of Jehovah's Witnesses and how they interpret and how they live in fear. They're so afraid they're going to do the wrong thing that they really cut back on everything. So we couldn't watch the Flintstones because she felt that Wilma and Betty were very, very manipulative, and they weren't very submissive wives. I'll get back to submissive with, if you're a female, something you can prepare to take on, not give up. But yeah, we never watched anything that was not PG. Nothing over PG for us. My sister was, I think she was 18 or 19 the first time she finally got up the guts to watch a PG-13 movie. So we watched a lot of Disney, a lot of musicals, and I'm not looking down on any of that. I raised my kids actually with those same great movies, but we definitely missed out on a lot of like classics that really, really completely harmless. And if you do decide, because sometimes they'll say things it's called a conscience matter, which means there's not a directive, maybe from the governing body, being the people who run everything for the watch time. It's let's just, I don't want to use them interchangeably, but they are interchangeable. But the governing body, basically, they send down the rules and everything. So they might have something that they say, well, that's a conscience matter. You as an individual need to decide that, or you as an individual need to decide that for your family. So things that were a conscience matter, my mom usually was like, no. And movies, TV, they're just afraid that you're going to see things that are going to make you think outside the box, wonder about other possibilities outside of the congregation, and they don't want that happening. You know, if something gets to you or gives you an idea and you start to think for yourself, that can be very dangerous. They can't risk that. So I do think that there is something to protecting our children from certain subject matter, absolutely. So in that manner, you are now the child, and so you can't make decisions for yourself. Often they will make those decisions for you. And even if as an adult you decide to go see, well, I would use like Rocky as an example, but that's a big no-no too, because violence, nothing with violence. If you decided though, you and your wife are on a date and you want to go see a movie, if another couple in a congregation sees you, that will be reported. You know, you're kind of the kind of shaky ground, you know, and they will be keeping an eye on you to see what other things that you might not be making the best conscience decision on. Extracurricular activities in school. If you have kids that are in school right now and they are in softball or band, those are extracurricular activities. Those are activities that take away from the worship of Jehovah. So the main reason they don't want you having extracurricular activities is because you are having further activity with non-Jehovah's Witnesses, which again, as I explained, is dangerous. And as I just mentioned, they don't want you doing anything that takes away from serving the church, serving the congregation, you know, and serving time. Well, you're serving time. You're going to do life. If you join this, yeah, you're going to do life. So, yeah, there was things. I was in drama for class, but the production for my grade occurred after class, when we did our plays for the school and parents, and I had to beg my parents, and they ended up letting me actually perform after school, but I couldn't. I had to do everything I had to do had to be in class. Another thing to think about if you're considering studying with the witnesses is material possessions. Now, I don't think it's good for anybody to be materialistic, to be overly materialistic. It's just a, I don't want to call it a quality. It's just a way of life that I don't find attractive. I don't find appealing. So, because they want you to spend as much time as possible in the service and working for the organization for free, it's better that you don't have very well-paying jobs, or that you're not a two-income family. I'm not saying there aren't two-income families. There are, but they prefer that there's not. They prefer to have somebody who can be in the full-time ministry. And so in that case, you don't own a lot of things, and therefore that is kind of underlined with the whole, you don't want to be materialistic. So trying to keep up with the Joneses, they use that phrase a lot. And people are very much rewarded for living very simple lives and being able to donate as much money as possible to the organization, especially now, from what I'm understanding. They are actually asking for money from the people in the congregation, which is something they never would have done when I was growing up. That was completely a no-no. That's one of the things that we separated ourselves from other churches and organizations, is that they didn't directly like ask for your money. But they would prefer if you could donate as much as possible to strengthen the service or to help places that are in need. So yeah, materialistic things. Also, you want to have vehicles that are pioneer friendly or service friendly. So for instance, this is my baby, which I absolutely love. I love this car. Right there, that statement would be exactly why they wouldn't want me to have that car, because I love it too much. And I might be putting my admiration towards an object, not towards Jehovah. But the other reason why this would not be a JW approved vehicle is because it is not gas friendly. And when you're spending a lot of miles on the road, knocking door to door, you want something that is gas efficient and hold as many people as possible. So yes, if you've ever seen the witnesses come to your neighborhood and they're piling out of the vehicle like circuses, clowns at a circus, yeah, as many people as they can fit it is what's hit that territory as much as they can. So they prefer minivans. My mom had a Suburban that I think easily, by making sure people in seatbelts, I think easily fit like 9. But they can always throw a couple of people in the back, squish some people in between, sit on people's laps. So yes, if you have a car that you really like, a little coupe or something, be prepared. They're not going to tell you have to get rid of it, but they are going to do this. You know, everybody's going to know. You're going to feel the shame, and eventually you'll be like, oh, I've given up my worldly ways, and you know, I'm going to get a vehicle that has better gas mileage and that is better suited for service. So yes, that's another thing you can prepare to give up. I think I mentioned earlier, submissiveness. Females, you have to be submissive. Submissive. That means whatever your husband says goes. If he is angry, mad, a good, loving Jehovah's Witness wife will continue to be loving, caring. I can't think of the exact word they use. But you're not to raise your temper to equal. You need to push yourself even more so that to get him back to being loving. If somebody, a female, for instance, my mother, for instance, she was a baptized pioneer, and so she would often lead book studies in the home, or I'll stick with that. She might maybe have somebody come to her house, or maybe have a couple of sisters or non-Jehovah's Witnesses they're witnessing to, and let's say they're in the house, and my mother is praying, because they open and they close every meeting with a prayer. And if my brother, who is a kid, but he's baptized, if he walks into the room, she has to put her hand over her head. Now, usually she would keep a handkerchief or something in her pocket, because they want you to have a head covering, because you need to acknowledge that he's higher than you. And so truly he should be the one conducting prayers, conducting book studies, you know, saying the prayers and whatnot. But if she's in the middle of that, or if there's a younger brother who maybe there's a 12-year-old brother who's been baptized, in order for her to conduct that study, she needs to acknowledge his basic superiority over her spiritually by covering her head. She often would just use her hand as a head covering. It's weird. I resented that a lot, because I'm sorry, but nobody's listening to their brothers. I'm not listening to my brothers. I don't care if they're baptized or not. And they were preparing, you know, prepare for that, and preparing us for those rules of understanding that when a baptized brother walks into the room, you need to acknowledge that if you're conducting a study or whatever. So it's very, they don't tell you any of these things when you're studying with them. And so that's why I'm making this video, so people know there's a lot of things they don't tell you that just kind of becomes a way of life. That I'm sure if you know Jehovah's Witnesses, you're probably sitting there going, I can't imagine my boss, Mrs. So-and-so at work, putting a head covering on because a 12-year-old baptized boy walked into the room and she needs to show that she's submissive to him. A lot of people don't realize little things like that go on. Divorce. If you choose to, you can't, first of all, just divorce somebody. There are no such thing as reconcilable differences in the Jehovah's Witness religion. When I was younger, I thought there was 2 reasons, and I'm very vague on it. The main reason that you can get divorced is adultery. So if your husband cheats on you, you can get a spiritual divorce. So if you get a divorce for any other reason, like you physically go to the courthouse and you file, and the witnesses do not believe that you had grounds, in other words, he did not commit adultery, then you are still not spiritually divorced from him, which means you can't marry anybody else in the congregation. A woman, and this is not something I experienced firsthand, but I know people who have, if a woman is being violently abused by her husband, even if he's not a Jehovah's Witness, so she's a witness, he is not, and he's beating her regularly for going to the meetings, she will be advised by the elders that she needs to be a kinder spirit at home, more loving. She cannot divorce him. If she divorces him to save her own life, she still is not spiritually divorced. They could also counsel her. They could disassociate her and counsel her on having a divorce. In fact, I know with my parents, who are both witnesses, they separated, and my mom for years, she had no contact with my dad, but every once in a while she would get a hold of me and like, does your dad have another family? I'm pretty sure he's committing adultery. Just give me grounds for divorce, Cass. I just want to file for divorce. Okay, well, frankly, please stop trying to put visuals of my dad naked having sex with other women in my head. I don't know anything about what he does in his life. She would ask this to a lot of us kids. She would not get a divorce from him because she knew that, according to the witnesses, it was wrong for her to divorce him. And I think they stayed married for like 8 or 9 years after that. They're divorced now. I didn't ask her the details of it, or how she managed that, or maybe she just chose to just be spiritually married to him forever. I don't even bring it up with her. I have better things to do. So yeah, that's a biggie, is be prepared. If you're in a really nasty situation, you are not allowed to leave your spouse. You have to stay. And sex. So I'm probably going to do a whole other video covering this because it's one of my favorite subjects. Once you're, obviously, like in many religions, I wouldn't say obviously, but in many religions, you know, they don't prefer sex before marriage. That's fine. But once you have sex, so once you get married, then have sex, your sex life is not your own. You cannot, there's a lot of things that you cannot do within your marital relationship. No oral sex. Even if you're a paraplegic and your doctor has said, in order to reach an orgasm and to experience that connection with your wife, here are some other things that you guys can do. No, not allowed. And then if you do, and I highly doubt my mother's ever going to see this, but she would probably stand by it anyways. There's a story from when she was married to my biological father that they had, and I hate this term, performed oral sex. It just grosses me out to me. I probably just had to hear it so much in a negative way growing up. I didn't know what performing oral sex was for the longest time. I don't know if, maybe doing jazz fingers and you're performing it. But, yeah, so they had done some things, as she put it, that went against the Jehovah's Witness beliefs, even though he wasn't a witness, and she went and told on herself. And the elders sat down with her, and, you know, she had to go into great detail about everything she had done, step by step, which is really creepy. You have this conversation by yourself with 3 men who are taking notes, you know, and whether you enjoyed it, and I know that must have drove my biological father nuts. He's like, she's out her damn mind. You're my wife. I want you to suck my dick. I want you to suck my dick. I will probably edit that out. Yeah, sorry. He's back east, very vulgar. He said it just blew his mind. He just laughs his butt off about it today. It just baffles him. Like, we're married, I don't understand. So yeah, they'll be very much enmeshed into your life. And there's going to be lots of things you give up and lots of things you have to share. Be kind of very open and transparent. I think transparency is important. I just don't think that people, like a governing body or a group of elders, should be able to judge you for being transparent. Whether you went and watched a rated R movie or touched yourself, it's another thing. No masturbation. You might think those parts are yours, but they're not. They belong to Jehovah. And I get it, that's not uncommon with a lot of religions. It's something I still severely am against. So I'm against that ruling of these things being bad. What couples do is pretty much their business. I think you're allowed to have sex with the lights on. So I think you're okay with that, as long as you don't have dirty thoughts while you're doing it. All right, so that pretty much ends my long list of part 2 of the things that you'll give up if you decide to become one of Jehovah's Witnesses. See you later.
I'm on the television!